Hey guys, welcome. This is CodeRed Rules, and today I'm going to be reviewing some hands played from the last week's Grinderschool Cash Game Series. This goes on week number 5. We're playing some 4L 4-ring on Lock Poker Merge Network. And so I'm going to start off right away. I've got 5 hands here from Back in Spades here that I'm going to cover real quick, and then I'll go on to the next player's hand that I find. In this particular hand, Back in Spades has King Jack offsuit with the King of Hearts. The button limps, Back in Spades isolates, which is an excellent play, by the way. You guys should be doing that rather than lumping in as well. Taking initiative in the hand, you're going to be winning a lot more money just by like when he calls and then you continuation bet here. So continuation bet, you have the King of Hearts. What are some good 2-barreling cards for us with the King of Hearts and the Jack of whatever we have, Jack of Diamonds? Well, any 10 or an ace are good barreling cards because, well, they give us outs and or they're scare cards. The Jack we wouldn't want to really barrel because it would give us middle pair, and we would then probably try to induce a bluff. The King we go for value bet. We could potentially bet a 9, although I probably wouldn't bet a 9, and we could be betting a lot of hearts too because it gives us a second nut draw, which is good enough for us to be barreling. So continuation bet out here. This is a good board for us to barrel. It's relatively dry. Queen 7-4. Well, the only hand he's likely to hit here is the queen, if he does have it. Otherwise, he might call you with some weak holding here that's going to give me up a lot of turns. So we turn one of our barreling cards which is the heart. Okay, and I would like to see us bet again here if we're going to continue in the hand. What Back in Spades does is checks and then decides to call, getting a little over 3-1 on his money. Now, granted, if our opponent has the queen, right, and he doesn't have ace queen with the ace of hearts, we need at least 4-1 to make the call. Perhaps even more than that if our opponent has trips, because then our opponent could boat up, which will give us a second best hand. So, with that said, we're not really getting the correct odds to call, getting 3-1 with our money. But if we wanted to continue with the hand, then we should be betting out on the turn at least. And if our opponent raises us, depending on the price, if he min raises us after bet out, we can probably call that. But otherwise, I don't feel too bad about bet folding on this turn, given that we only have the King of Hearts to draw. So if this were me, I'd either bet it out or I would check fold it. It'd be different if he had bet something really small, like maybe half this amount, 18 cents, where we actually are getting the direct price to make this call. But we're not, so let's go ahead and fold. Alright, so we go on to the next hand here. This is a hand Back in Spades plays. He gets a free big blind. He has 9-4 offsuit. And we flop middle pair or something like that. Middle pair bottom kicker. This is something that you guys probably face a lot. You know what I mean? Like, okay, limps in the small blind. He min bets out or he bets pot out. What do we do here? Well, we go ahead and give it a call because we have a pair. And pairs are really hard to beat when you're playing heads up. Now, our opponent bets again at 8 cents. And here's the thing, right? So the reason why we called the flop isn't because we were going to bluff the turn, right? And this is essentially what Back in Spades says here as he bluff raises the turn. The reason why we called the flop is because we felt like we were ahead enough compared to our opponent's actions that we can continue with the hand. So when we decide to raise this turn, we're turning a hand to a bluff, and we no longer think our hand is going to be ahead, given our opponent's actions. That's the reason why we're bluffing. But there's a little bit of confusion there, because if we were ahead on the flop, but we're now behind on the turn, the very hand that's going to be calling us is the one that we're representing, right? Is with ace. So it doesn't make any sense at all for us to make this raise, because nothing really got in there but the ace. But if he does have the ace, which we're trying to represent, he's going to call us anyway. So this is one of those situations where we're going to get called when we're behind. We're going to get called when we're behind. And if our opponent had air, he's going to be folding, but not really doing much else in between. All right, so if you still feel like you have the best hand here, go ahead and call the 8 cents again. I probably would be more willing to do that rather than trying to put in more money here. Remember, it was only a limped pot. You don't need to be throwing in a lot of money in a pot where it was just really tiny to begin with. Plus, you don't really have anything. All right. So in this situation, go ahead and call the turn, but more than likely, you could probably even fold the flop, given it was a pot size lead. I probably wouldn't, but it wouldn't necessarily be a bad fold just because if you're having a HUD sets up, go and show you what I'm looking at here. He's got a relatively low aggression frequency and aggression factor, so that means when he is betting, he likely has a good hand. It's not like super low, but it's low enough that I would give me some credit. Especially, the aggression factor is a big amount. That's actually the magnitude of the bet, and a pot size bet from our opponent here is actually pretty big, especially when on the turn we see that he bets like a third of the pot, right? So why wouldn't our opponent have min bet the flop? No idea. I think our opponent probably has King X here quite often. He bets pot in the flop because he thinks his hand is the nuts, and he bets a third of the pot on the turn because he doesn't, he's now afraid of the hand that you could possibly have, but he just bets the amount he thinks his hand is worth at that point. Alright, so we can go on to the next hand here, and I have Ace King of Diamonds, and I'm playing against Back in Spades, and I pop it up in early position, and as you can see here, we are going to be 5-way. Alright, I go ahead and value bet. Back in Spades, by the way, has pocket tens, alright, with a 10 of clubs. And what do you guys think that I'm actually betting here? Okay, 5 into 5 opponents with that I'm bluffing with high frequency in order for pocket tens to make this call. All right, keep in mind that when you're 5-way, more than likely everybody hit this hand or somebody hit this hand somewhere. Would I really be betting here with pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket tens? Really think about what I'm raising in early position. So I guess all these opponents. Am I betting pocket twos? Probably not on that one. So I'm gonna be betting some, a lot of my flush draws and stuff. But most of the time, I'm betting pretty strictly just King X here, or better. So keep that in mind. This would be a good spot for just to go ahead and fold pocket tens against somebody who's continuation betting into a boatload of people, like I am here. Very likely that your tens aren't any good. All right. But that really wasn't the biggest leak that I found in this hand. The biggest leak that I found in this hand was when I checked him on the turn, because I don't think I can get any more value out of him with my current hand, just because if he has a bluff, or if he has a flush draw, he's probably going to be folding to my turn bet. And the only other really pair hand he could have that I would beat would be King Queen. Right? So my only goal is to check to him and hopefully I induce a bluff from a flush draw. Which I do, and he bets out with his pocket tens here. He has the double gutter, I believe, an 8 or a queen gives him the straight. So he's got anywhere between 8 and 10 outs, depending on what I have in my hand. But that still only puts him at around 20% equity. The reason why you bet here, I'm not really too sure, given the fact that you have a reasonable showdownable hand. The only hand that I don't really know what hand I would bet the flop with, and then check fold on the turn that pocket tens is behind 2 at this point. I can't think of anything. So your best bet here would be just go ahead and check behind and not try to get me to fold up air or whatever I have. So yeah, not a very good bet for you here on the turn. Which I call and then we check it out on the river. And I was debating whether I would call river bet again, just because I really did feel like I wasn't going to be ahead at this point. Not that I didn't expect to see tens to bet, but it's a very strange bet in my opinion. All right, so we go on to the next hand here, and it's going to be along the same concepts with Back in Spades, where he overlimps with the pocket eights, and you could very easily, and you should quite often, be isolating your opponent here, especially someone who's very weak. All right, look who's behind you. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 nits behind you. We don't want to let those guys in for cheap. All right, so let's go ahead and isolate. You can even isolate a little bit bigger than normal. Given an open limper, you can make it a good 20 cents here probably. Make sure it gets heads up between you and the fish, and you're going to make a lot of money. Well, we end up hitting the 8, and we call the min bet here on the flop. We don't hit the 8, I'm sorry. we have middle pair, and we have actually the 8 of clubs, which so now we have the open and straight draw and a weak flush draw of some kind. Our opponent decides to min bet again, and at this time we decide to raise it up. Now, I'm very confused about this raise size, and I guess the question you'd ask yourself is, would you be betting here if your opponent checked you? Because honestly, if everybody checked you here and you bet out 20 cents, it's roughly the same thing as betting 20 cents and raising the 20 cents. There's no difference other than the fact that it's technically a raise. And I would argue that you shouldn't be betting here with your pocket eights because you still have a reasonable chance of winning at showdown. There are very few. If let's say you are ahead here, what can your opponent have that you really are afraid of? Like, so if your opponent has like I don't know, Queen Jack, okay, yeah, he's got some outs, but the Jack gives you the straight, the club gives you the flush, the 8 gives you a set, and there's not very many 8s out there. So Queen Jack, which would arguably be one of your opponent's better hands, one of your opponent's better draws, still doesn't have as many outs as you think he does. You're still going to win against Queen Jack a good 75-80% of the time. So I would argue that you wouldn't want to bet here when check 2, and you would essentially then just want to call this bet here and draw to your hand for cheap, and then build a pot after you hit it. All right, let's see what happens here. You raise it up, check behind, and you notice their opponent called you with Ace 5, with the Ace of Clubs. He actually made a somewhat okay play, other than betting the flop and betting the turn. He definitely should be calling your turn raise. And you were trying to bluff your opponent, and you were mistakenly going for value. That was kind of funny. I do love when that happens when you turn a hand into a bluff and you actually realize that you got value from your opponent. But that's not what you're intending on doing. And I feel like you should just have called the turn bet and then hope to hit your draw on the river. Alright, so we've got one last hand here, and I believe this one again is against me. I have pocket jacks. I get re-raised by pocket spades. So right away, backhand spade had been re-raising me somewhat, but I'm not really putting him on too much of a bluffing range, given the raise size that he made it. Also, there's a top up button on the side as well. I mean, I'm not giving him. I'm not really thinking he's bluffing me too much. I think like the very, so I'm pretty much counting on his value range at this point. Pre-flop, and he's also he's going to have some bluffs, which is the reason why I'm not folding my jacks. Right, so this is a good board for pretty much what I'm calling with. This board definitely hits my range and not his, and so that's what you got to be thinking about when you're dealing in a re-raised pot here. All right, if I have a pair, which given the raise size that he made it, right, I made it 10 cents. He re-raised me to 30 cents, which is only a 6.5, 7.5 big blind re-raise. It's not a whole lot. It's only 5 big blinds for me to call, so I'm almost getting pot odds to make the call. What hands would I be calling the re-raise with? Well, probably hands like Ace Queen, Ace King, maybe Ace Jack, maybe King Queen. I know all of my pairs that I would call with. Probably would call my pairs over the King Queen kind of hands, just because pairs play actually pretty easily in re-raise pots. Much easier than say a hand like King Queen does. Because with a pair, I'm not going to be stacking off with most of my pairs, especially including this one. I won't be stacking off here if my opponent decided to go all in. But it's also very easy for me to play. So the reason why I don't like backhand spades bet here, backhand spades, by the way, has Ace King offsuit with no spade. I don't like his bet here because if I'm folding out Ace Queen, or he's folding out Ace Queen. He's folding out King Queen. Hands where if a king hits on the next street and I have King Queen, he's going to get 2 streets of value from me. All right, hands that he doesn't want to see fold. What hands I won't be folding is pretty much any pair 4 or higher. Perhaps not even a 3 or higher. Pocket 3s are better. So there's not really any pair that I'm folding in this situation. So a hand like Ace King here is kind of just throwing money down the toilet when he makes his bet. I obviously am going to be calling. The Queen hits, I have the spade. Technically, if our opponent had the Ace of Spades here, a jam wouldn't be too bad of a play. He's got a lot of equity, possibly 2 overcards. And he's going to put a lot of pressure on a hand like me with my jacks, because my opponent... I'm still putting Ace Queen in my opponent's hand range. But if our opponent doesn't have the Ace of Spades or even the King of Spades, there's not really a whole lot he should be doing here, and just checking behind and giving up. And once the spade hits, I'm no longer folding, but I can't really go for value either. So we check it down and we see that he does in fact have ace king. All right, so with those 5 hands, I believe I've gone through enough hands here from back in spades, and I believe the overarching theme is just not really sure of when you should be betting, and I I know that's a hard concept to get over. Tried to avoid being specific and try to search for over, I guess, general areas where you should want to be betting, right? Like turning hands into bluffs, and maybe just are you going to have fold equity or fold percentage on a continuation bet. So, all right, I'll be right back with the next player. All right, we're back. Now, these hands are going to be played by Many Penguins, also goes by Pocket Penguins on the forum. And he's coming, one of the regulars during our Cash Game Series, and he plays among the most tables and plays among most hands, so I actually have a lot of hands to go through from him, so that's why I have another 5 hands to review from Pocket Penguin, Pocket Penguins, Many Penguins. And he shares a lot of the same leaks, rather, as our last participant, back in spades. And let's see if we can't find some. So here's an example where he shares a leak with back in spades. And all right, first up, so I continuation bet here. I raise the middle position, right, and a continuation bet out. And Many Penguins has pocket 8s. On this board with pocket 8s, calling out a position, I would go ahead and just check fold. Because what would you, or think of it, I'm not really going to be betting like jacks, queens, kings, or aces, right, but I'm going to be betting almost all my aces. And the other hands he could really put me on include hands like jack, queen, king, king, jack, all that have a ton of equity against pocket 8s, including a jack, queen, king, or ace comes. There is just so much equity that I have. There's not really a whole lot you can do with. And if you throw in, if I have any backdoor flush draws or whatever like that, there's just not a whole lot of hope for you to be playing under pairs on this kind of board. Now, if it was a re-raised pot, and you thought I was bluffing quite a bit and had a more polarized hand range, then perhaps maybe peel a card here. And if you had pocket jacks, then I'd expect you to call pocket jacks, but not pocket 8s. There's a big difference in hand strength there, specifically because like the ace pairing and you having a blocker to couple of my outs is very key. All right, so if I had 8s here, I'll be folding. All right, you didn't fold. You ended up check calling. I checked behind the turn. All right, the reason why I checked behind the turn is because I felt like I can no longer get any more value from my opponent, given the hand strength I have. So what I was trying to do is, I also knew that I wasn't going to be getting 3 streets of value from my opponent here anyway, because I felt like if I bet 3 streets, my opponent's only going to be calling me with probably also ace king and then 10 axes, and I just don't see Pocket Penguins here calling with a worse hand than ace jack pre-flop, and then also like giving me 3 streets of value here. So the reason why I checked behind is on the turn. It's not because I felt like I was behind. It was because I wanted to make it seem like I had the bottom end of my hand range, or I had absolutely nothing, and I would continue to get looked up again on the river if I bet again. All right, or perhaps even to induce a bluff, which is what happened here when Pocket Penguins decides to bet his pocket 8s on this river he's betting this, I'm assuming, to get me to fold something. I don't know what I would have in my hand range here that would fold, so that pocket 8 isn't already ahead of. So, if I had king queen, I'd be folding and pocket 8 wins. If I had ace x, I'm calling, pocket 8 loses. So this bet here is a very confusing bet, and I don't really see getting value from a hand like king high, just because you got to be thinking what I'm thinking is, well, what does our opponent start calling this flop with that king high is ahead of, and there's not really a whole lot going on there. So this little bet on the river is a very, I wouldn't say very, but it's a bet that has a lot of leaks to it, and trying to get ahead of your thought process here, right, and trying to think about and trying for you to realize why you make this bet. Once you're able to realize why you make this bet, we can go on to, I mean, hopefully you continue to stop making these bets in the future, because this is a pretty bad bet on this river with pocket eights, and something that maybe you get confused with, like red lines and I mean, trying to win more without showdown, something like that. And this is a perfect example where you should just be checking, and if I bet again, all right, that's your decision point. Not your decision point isn't to whether to bet or how much to bet. It's whether to call if I were to bet in the river, which would be a tough decision with the eights, no doubt, but it would be an easier decision on the river, in my opinion, with the eights than it would have been on the flop. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that one hand, even though it's already been done. All right, so in this situation, I have ace queen suited. You end up calling me again, and it's pretty much the exact same hand. All right, my opponent has pocket tens. I live at the flop. I decide I really can't get too much more value from my opponent, given my opponent's hand range include sevens through higher pairs quite a bit. So I check to him, and he checks behind, and I value bet again. Actually, no, that's not the exact same hand, is it? Well, I feel silly. What I was going to argue is essentially, should you be calling this river here, given the way I played the hand? And I feel like I've already kind of sidetracked from this hand enough. So I'll go ahead and just try and be as blunt as I possibly can. And with tens on this river, I'm not too sure on how much value you're going to have with the call, given the way it's played, right? Because here's the first question you got to ask yourself. If I were bluffing here, why wouldn't I continue to bluff on the turn with such a great bluffing card? And I went over this quite a bit in my Heads Up, How to Master Heads Up series, right? The betting lines. What does the bet, check, bet line mean a lot of the times as a continuation better? That's a line that means thin value. All right, and I believe I said that in my How to Master series. Whereas the bet line is going to be more likely for me to be bluffing than, say, the bet check bet line on that river bet. And I think that's an interesting topic there. And if you guys haven't seen that series, I mean, I really like that slide. That kind of point in the lecture covers not just heads up, but actually like all forms of hold. I'm thinking about what my bet lines would mean. If I were to check this flop, okay, and then bet turn, bet river, what would that mean? All right, what kind of hands would I do that with? Why would I check this flop? Well, I would check this flop with a marginal weight hand. Right? If I had a bluff, I'd bet the ace-high flop. If I had a value hand, right, I would value bet this flop. So if I were checking this flop and then bet the turn, what would that mean? Well, that would mean that I am now value betting. The check bet line would be value bet. All right, so check that out, guys, if you guys haven't seen that already. But I don't think this is a very good call with tens on the river. All right, going on here, I have pocket jacks, as I seem to be card rack. I played a lot of hands, by the way. Many Penguins decides to raise up. He's got king, queen, and diamonds here, perfectly standard raise. My 3-bet is pretty normal as well. I mean, I'm not really playing with HUD stats, so I'm not really sure of who's got what's. He continuation bets. I have the jacks on his side to call, and he bets again with the king, queen, and diamonds. Now, what in the world do you think that I'm going to be folding on this turn that I didn't fold on the flop? Because the board hasn't changed, period. I mean, if I've still got 6s and 8s, you know what I mean, why would I fold this turn, given that I didn't fold the river? So keep in mind, you got to keep your barreling under control and keep it to the hand ranges that do you best. So if you had like an ace come on this turn, that'd be a much, much better barreling card than, say, another 4. All right. Another good barreling card would be any diamond. All right, because you have the backdoor diamonds, and you picked up a lot of equity, and so you want to be barreling when you want to be bluffing when you have a lot of equity in the hand. All right, so not a very good barrel. I mean, if you had bet again on the river, it would have been very hard for me to call you down again with this triple barrel on this board. I probably would have folded, but I mean, it's such a sick board, you don't really know what I have either. I mean, you're looking, my hand range pretty much smacks this board right in the middle, whereas yours has a lot of overcards in it. Alright, so on the next hand here, we have Ace Queen offsuit, as Mini Penguins does, and he gets 3-bet by Stevie Rocket, who I'm not sure he's a GS member. I forget. But let's talk about two things here pre-flop. First off, Ace Queen facing a re-raise probably should just be folding it, especially when we're early position, especially when it's Ace Queen offsuit, especially when the person who's 3-betting us is kind of tight. All right, so there's three things going for you there that you should just be folding right now. On the opposite end, I'll tell you right now, Stevie Rocket has pocket nines. Not a very good 3-bet either for pocket nines. It's a classic example of somebody who not really sure on how to play the hand, has seen, knows it's probably the best hand right now, but doesn't really understand that when he's called, he's way behind. Except when you're up against pocket penguins who calls Ace Queen offsuit. All right, Ace Queen offsuit, it kind of plays itself on this board post flop. We check call. We could probably go for value here on the river if we want to, or we could try to induce another bet, all of which works out perfectly. The nines falls into our trap. So I think post-flop, Pocket Penguins, you played just fine with Ace Queen. Pre-flop, though, just go ahead and fold it and move on. Don't try to play that kind of hand. I would even fold guys Ace Queen suited here. Don't even bother with it. Facing a re-raise when you're out of position like that. In fact, most instances you should be folding Ace Queen offsuit to a re-raise, especially when we're in early position. All right, so the last hand here for Mini Penguins, he has Ace Jack offsuit, and for facing the early middle position raise here, with a tight opponent, step one would be folding pre-flop after you top off your stack, please. So step one would be folding pre-flop. All right, but we've already called. So how do we play this hand? Well, we're not folding the flop when we hit a pair. That's for sure. So we're calling once. That's the easy one. The hard one now is, what do we do here? Facing a near pot-sized bet on this turn when we only have second pair and a gut shot draw with no flush draw present, even though we had the ace of clubs in the flop. Right now, this is going to be a fold. And the reason why this is a fold is because I think the best hand we're hoping for, unless we had a jack on the river, the best hand we're hoping for is a queen. But then we're going to end up splitting the pot a lot against somebody who has us outkicked. There's not really a lot of value to be calling in this situation. In fact, we may already be drawing dead if our opponent has ace queen or a set of some kind. So there's not really a whole lot of value to be calling again. I would be folding. Now what you did was you ended up calling and binking off of the jack and got lucky on this board and value bet it and got called by ace king. So and it's a tough play by ace king, not really knowing what you should be doing here. But I think the problem lies with you having ace jack on this board. If you had queen jack, okay, if you had queen jack, there's no problem with the way you play the hand. All right, but ace jack is a much different problem. All right, so those are a few hands for Mini Penguins. I still have some time left in this video. I'm trying to get a few more players, get a few more hands in. Be able to go away. I think I got to do some Daka Bear hands. I didn't review any hands of his from the GTS, so now I've got to look into him. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back with some hands played by Daka Bear. A couple of these are going to be pretty standard, I feel, but I think I need to be said here. Daka Bear in this situation has pocket nines. Ulysses Canis is another Grand School member, so this is, I guess, counts for both. This will be, I think this is Ulysses Canis' first GCS week, and that's awesome. Welcome. And looks like he got pretty lucky here. Okay, so Daka Bear has pocket nines. He bets out. Excellent. All right. Turn is blank with pocket nines. We overbet. I don't really. Whatever. I mean, it's almost a little too obvious, but if we wanted to, I think full pot would be fine. When you make the over bet, it says a lot about your hand. Whereas if you're making a full pot, it's a lot harder to differentiate your hand range. All right, and on the river, it's absolutely blank. There's only two hands in the world that will beat us right now, pocket queens and pocket aces. And our opponent bets out less than half pot, and we just decide to call. Um, with pocket nines here, we should be jamming this river and like double fist pumping that we're able to get our stacks in the middle. All right. I don't know if he had some kind of soul read or what. Ulysses Canis had pocket aces, but we should have lost our stack here because the amount of times that he has ace queen in the same situation that he's slow playing you on and playing the exact same way, he's going to have ace queen 9 combinations. He's going to have ace queen 9 combinations. He's going to have aces and queens total of 6. All right. So all that combined, same situation. If his range is ace queen, aces and queens, jamming this river means we get his stack 9 out of 15 times. Yeah, we're going to lose this 6 out of 15 times. But I don't know what kind of soul read you had, but we should be getting our stack in the middle in this situation. All right, on to the next hand. We have ace queen offsuit in this situation, and we decide to call Pyretos, which is a pretty good play, given the Pyretos is pretty loose. We end up flopping top pair with our ace queen, and Pyretos goes for the check raise. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you know anything about Pyretos, he does some kind of strange things. This could be a pretty elaborate bluff, because I've seen him post in the SG forum about check raise bluffing, rather than continuation betting. Or this could be a pretty good value hand. But what's the value then in both of those scenarios of us re-raising him and re-raising him to a really strange min re-raise size? I find that there's not a whole lot of value to either of these, right? Because if he's bluffing, he's going to be folding. If he's doing it with a strong value hand, well, then he has his crush, right? So we should just be calling the check raise situation, not 3-betting. When he 4-bets us back, all right, we really should be, especially a weak 4-bet like that, thinking he probably doesn't have a bluff anymore. And given that said, if he had a combo draw, he's probably jamming all in on that flop. So you got to be thinking about his value range. And given the action right here, we should be folding ace queen, even though it's pretty gross. However, I would have betting the flop is fine. I would call the check raise, call a turn bet, and if he goes all in on the river, I would probably fold. But as played, I mean, I know you feel pot committed here, but I don't know how you feel like there's any way you're ahead on this turn, or I don't understand it at all. But we are very far behind, and Pyretos has the queen. And now we could argue that Pyretos' flop check raise is kind of strange, but look at the kind of reaction you got from ace queen. So I would say it's a good check raise. All right, so on to the final hand, where we have ace king. We decided to re-raise up a min raiser in a late position. It's a kind of a interesting play. I don't know if he's got his HUD stats on or not. I usually don't. Most players, I would say here, would just call them min raise. And the reason why I don't, guys, by the way, is because it would affect the way I import the hands for the Grinderschool Cash Series. So I'm forced to sell without the HUD. But if I had my HUD going here, I wouldn't be re-raising because of the small raise size, or as far as the small pre-flop raise my opponent has. But that said, all right, the re-raise size, I won't comment on. I'm not a big fan of it. I think making it 30 cents here would make a lot more sense, maybe even 32 cents, if not even more than that, if we wanted to make it a full-blown re-raise. Our opponent calls out of position, all right, and we end up flopping the best possible hand we could hope for, I would say, what we really want to see, and that's ace-king with a top pair, top kicker on a drawy board. The stack sizes are such that it's going to be very difficult for us to get stacks in if we just bet all the way down. So we bet the flop, standard, bet the turn. Real quick, what's a river bet going to be like given our current bet size? All right, so he made a half pot bet. The pot in the river will be $2.12. Our opponent is going to have $1.91, around there. I mean, yeah, it's less than a pot-sized river shove, but if we made this instead 60, if we made this 2/3 instead, making it 67 cents or whatever, 68 cents, the pot would then be much larger. It would be 136, 442. Right? That doesn't make any sense. Can't do math. 332 or 232. Jesus Christ, I have no idea. I probably should just pull up the calculator here. I don't know why I'm doing it in my head. Wasting time. Alright, 67 times 2 plus 1. No. 7 times 2 plus 106. 240. Excellent. So, our opponent is going to have 177 behind. So, look at the percentage that goes down. So, the way you bet here, yeah, you're going to set yourself up for a pot size river bet. If you raise it up another 15 cents, you're going to have a 3/4 size river bet, which is going to look more smooth, I feel like. I'd rather do the 3/4 size river bet than a pot size one. It feels going to... Plus, this way you kind of give him more odds to draw to a flush as compared to if you just wait to put a pot size river bet out there where if you were bet bigger earlier, it'd give your opponent less implied odds to hit on you. Your opponent calls, right, and sets this up, and for some reason we decided to check behind. We're afraid of the ace-jack. Now, for all reasons, I don't understand why we're afraid of the ace-jack. When our opponent could have ace-queen, ace-10, ace-9, ace-7. I mean, we could potentially have missed an entire $1.90 of value in the situation. Opponent had ace-6. I would guarantee you that he's calling a bigger turn bet size with that. And then it's just a matter of what's the best bet we can get on a river for value. All right, if you didn't want to shove in the situation, I think there's, because maybe ace-6 doesn't call a shove, right? But I think there's a bet size greater than 0 on this river that we can get ace-6 to call. And so therefore there's going to be a bet size on this river where it's going to be plus EV for us to make. And the number would be between 0 and 1.91. And 0 would not be the number. So, anyway, I felt like I had to get some hands in from Daka Bear because I totally didn't get him in from the Grinderschool Tournament Series. But, alright, I'm going to put you guys on pause again. I still have maybe time for, maybe 4 or 5 more hands here, hopefully. I think all the players who sent me in the most hands have all been covered. So I'm going to try and find you some smaller guys. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I've got 2 more hands here for you guys. This one, I fold my queen jack suited because I'm a nit. Ultra covert here checks pocket 8s in the big blind, I believe. Let me make sure. No, he didn't, actually. I'm sorry. Ultra covert had 10-5 in this situation. And our opponent here, 35-5, short stack, decides to overbet the pot. So, what to think about in this situation when we have a hand like bottom 2 pair? The first off is we gotta feel like we're still ahead. Secondly, you gotta put pocket aces in your opponent's hand range. He's a fish. You open limps. You can include pocket aces and pocket kings in his hand range nearly every single time. Just because they like to slow play, limping, limp re-raising, whatever is right in their wheelhouse. Right? So whenever you can put pocket aces in somebody's hand range, and you've got 2 pair, it's usually very easy for you to consider stacking off. Right? So our opponent overbets the pot here. I don't mind just calling. I think calling is just fine. Keep in mind there's a lot of bad cards for us. That includes a spade, a jack, a king, an ace, along those lines. Our opponent could very easily have ace-queen too. Now, check raising would be fine here. I think calling is fine. But given that we didn't check raise the flop, I think now is the perfect time for us to just go ahead and just stack it in. Alright? So, I would check raise all in, not worry about anything, stack off. Alright, what we do is wait for the river to come in. I mean, we should have lost the rest of our 58 cents here. Our opponent river's 2 pair on us. We have 10-5. We lose our 2 pair. But I would feel much better. I'd feel much happier about the way we played the hand if we were to get the stacks in when we actually have the best hand. And there's something there's something to be said about always being able to get the money in when you have the best hand, rather than at river when your opponent has already hit his hand. All right, so that's a pretty easy one, right? That's not too much. Just getting it stacking on the turn there when stacks are able to. The next hand was played by X. His name is K245606. Kenny came in for just a few hands here at the end of the tournament. He has Ace-10 offsuit, raises it up pre-flop, gets called, sets this continuation bet, which is a good. I think it's a decent continuation bet. And with that said, don't expect to get too much value from Ace-10 on this board. Right? It's really dry. What can our opponent be calling us with here that Ace-10 is really ahead of at this point? All right, calling on the turn or betting again on the turn, it's becoming more marginal, right? Because we will lose as Ace-10. He loses to Ace-Jack, Ace-Queen, Ace-King, Ace-7, Ace-6, and Ace-Deuce of all the aces. So that's 6 of them, right? We beat Ace-3, Ace-4, Ace-5, Ace-8, and Ace-9. All right, so I would argue you can't go for value here with Ace-10 because there are 6 worse aces than us out there that beat us, and 5 that we beat. Now, granted, the ones that we beat are going to have a little more combinations than the ones that beat us, and so this is a very, very marginal turn double barrel. But all right, so you did that, but then on the river, right? These 8s and stuff, they're not good cards for you because all it's doing is it's taking hands that you were ahead of on the turn and turning them into hands that now beat you. Whereas if this was a Jack or a Queen or a King, I'd much rather see that because you're taking combinations away from hands that beat you. All right, so I would argue you can't go for 3/3 of value here with Ace-10. I would check the river, perhaps even check the turn, and induce a bluff and check call down that way. All right, so guys, thanks for sending in your hands. Thanks for playing. This has been CodeRed Rules coming to you for another week or so. See you guys next month at the next GTS. Thanks for playing, and thanks for handing in hands. Good luck with the tables.